Well, we're back with Trust Your Gut here in November. It is cold and rainy today in Philly.
Mhm.
And I'm Erin Trent Johnson here with Antonio Aragona, Doctor of Ayurvedic Medicine. And we are here today to talk about what are we talking about, Dr. A?
Yeah, so I mean, always the core gem is Ayurveda, what it is. Um, its current and practical application and its integration within the context and alongside uh, allopathic medicine or Western medicine and all those things, its offerings. And we can touch upon like this time of year and then generally discuss, or continue to discuss viruses if we get there, or like in, these kind of like historical things. But the overall arching purpose, scope, and the relevancy of Ayurveda.
Yes,
Um,
and I am also excited to talk about um as we've been in this conversation, the name of the podcast is Trust Your Gut. And I feel like my entry point to understanding health, wellness, and well-being um, through the lens of Ayurveda has been through the gut. It has been through understanding um, my gut feelings, my gut knowledge, the somatic awareness as well as the sensorial awareness. It is where I experience intuition. It is where I experience also discernment between and where I can know the difference between intuition and and fear, intuition and anxiety, intuition and old stories. So I feel like there's the wisdom that comes through the gut is or that we feel and sense into from the gut is also what has called me to want to study and know more about the wisdom of Ayurveda. So I just wanted to bring that in here too.
yes, that's great. So I'll start off with shlokas as tradition, and as we tradition within the context of our podcast together, tradition within representation of proper Ayurveda. Um, I remember having a conversation with a colleague saying, you know, he doesn't know very much Sanskrit, let alone feels the necessity to include the Sanskrit because it's daunting and it might keep people away and things like that. And I said it's about the delivery of the information because any clinical or clinician of Ayurveda that's properly trained will always mention the shlokas because these shlokas, these particular lines from these texts that are the primary texts of Ayurveda that all Ayurvedic physicians study from, it's understanding how to relate to these primary texts because these are the teachings of all teachers. And these teachings come from, these master Ayurvedic physician scientists that existed thousands of years ago that have, you know, connoted this relationship to the universal consciousness and understanding science. And within the context of Ayurveda, it's fascinating because as an Ayurvedic, you know, um, within Ayurvedic training, it's essential that as Ayurvedans, we have to know everything about all the sciences. So in med school, you learn, all the sciences just in general so that you can think properly and know how to integrate certain things so you can create protocols, treatments, all these kind of things. And similarly in Ayurveda, we have to know about all the sciences, all the sciences. So in Western science, it's, biopharmacology and physiology and immunology, et cetera, all the different topics in med school, with the small component of nutrition still to today. Um, and in Ayurveda, you have to know about astronomy, astrology, geography, geology, um, you know, uh, then all the regular sciences, biology, physics, et cetera, because it gives us this universal capacity to look at the individual and not just look at it as a system of parts.
Mhm.
And it's very interesting because up until like the late 80s, early 90s, the body was viewed as parts, and one part breaks down, you just replace it, you just do this, then the other thing. And we know more holistically, especially with the scientific researches since then, that there's more to just the body and its parts and things like that. And this is Ayurveda. And so in current times, biomedicine's overwhelmed. Western doctors are overwhelmed. They're fatigued. Patients are fatigued with the system. Western doctors are more fatigued with the system. There's a higher level of stress in this. And in Ayurveda, you know, and Eastern medicine in general, the Western eye is looking more towards the part of the world that has existed for a long period of time, that survived time itself, for more awareness, because there's a lot of things lacking and pieces missing that require like a filling in, and Ayurveda is this completion. And so,
Mm.
in understanding Ayurveda, first, we look at the word Ayurveda, it's a Sanskrit word. Ayu is about life and longevity, and Veda is the science. And so in Charaka Samhita, in Sutrasthana, this particular chapter called Sutrasthana, line 22, it says, Vedam Kopadisya Virve Chayam Tatrayushe Chetana Vritti Jivita Manubhando Dhari Chityekot Vrittaha. So basically, you know, someone asked within the context of this discussion, because a lot of these things in Ayurveda started from discussions from the student to the teacher to the guru to the person that was like the embodiment of Ayurveda. And so this question was asked about, can you describe what is Ayu, which is like life? And, it's very simple, but it's also very complex, because in Eastern thinking versus Western thinking. Western thinking is more, especially in English, like it's very just basic, like literal explanation, description, definition. But in other languages that are formed differently, like in Sanskrit and Hebrew, it is a different way of thinking. It compounds information and has more of an expansive quality that pertains to context. And so Ayu here is talking about, well, what is Ayu? What is life? It means anuvritti, which is continuity of chetana, which is consciousness, and
Mhm.
which is being alive, jivata, which is like, jivita, which is like being alive, and bonding with the body, the anubandha, and preserving vitality. So like, what is life? It's like it's understanding of like there is something of this continuation of consciousness. You can say soul. There's this inherent, intuitiveness that comes from a different place that's just beyond the brain chemistry, the liver, chemistry, like just something in the blueprint of the design of this physical body that's manifested, that created this Ayu, just created this life. And so Ayurveda, it's not coincidental that it starts with Ayurveda, the science of life and longevity, which includes death, and everything within this dome of space and cosmic consciousness. And, you know, it's like that's a very vast science. And so when we think about Western versus Eastern, it shouldn't be, because Eastern encompasses, and I've had conversations with colleagues that are medical doctors and naturopaths, and I say to them, it's a clear distinction, that there's a difference that becomes versus in the West, with this versus mentality. It's such a versus mentality, instead of
Yes.
inclusive mentality. Ayurveda has to understand how naturopathy works, homeopathy works, Chinese medicine works, polarity therapy works, Reiki works, allopathy works, Peruvian shaman. Like Ayurveda has to understand, you know, and it does. So the Ayurvedic, the person that's practicing Ayurveda as a clinical practice, has to understand the qualities of all these things to know when is it appropriate, when is it medicinal, when is it poisonous. Because in Ayurveda, um, there's this understanding like everything in the universe is medicine, no matter what it is. The verses comes from Western not knowing what Eastern is thinking. And the problem will always therein lie that when Western is trying to fit Ayurveda into its model, it will cut off many pieces, because Ayurveda is very vast. And, Western science is slow to adapting, even though we're developing all this automation, robotics, AI things, which is great. But that AI isn't the supreme being that exists in all of us. It can never be the supreme being. It's an expression of supreme being. It's a tentacle. It's all encompassing. And so that Western clinician scientist has to like expand past its capacity to really incorporate more, but it's slower as it's trying to create these like research, components to like break things down, understand the small pieces of the bigger piece. That's a much bigger piece. So it's very hard. So when you try to do that, you cut off the limbs of everything else that you're trying to put this body into a box. It cannot happen. and that's always going to be the struggle because it's very interesting, to think about like something so vast, and Ayurveda has had this inward state of being and it's so many pieces. And then it's like, well, what is the objective of Ayurveda as we continue like in this particular chapter, and it's stated, Prayojanam chasya swastasya swastya rakshamurtayasya vikara prashamanaham cha pramam cha. And it's like, oh, the purpose of the science is to preserve the health of the healthy and cure the disease of the unhealthy. So it's basic, and we're cautious of using the word cure in the US because no one really claims cure. So for to be PC, it's like help resolve as much as possible, any kind of current ailments. But the bigger thing in Ayurveda, which Ayurveda brings so many things to the world and so many things that are challenging. This is very interesting. Like Ayurveda is not challenged by Western medicine. It understands it. Western medicine is challenged by Ayurveda and anything that's holistic that takes the power away. But in
Can we
Ayurveda,
slow down right there?
yes.
Because that's huge.
Yeah.
The uh the rejection of what's holistic in service of taking the power away. Like that um feels it feels essential to understand. That it is about power and so as we think about our health, right? Like the Western mindset is also that um that there is a binary, right? There's a good or bad. There's a right or wrong, and I think good or bad in evaluating or qualifying the both uh, the impact, but also in that, to your point, in compartmentalizing and making a binary choice to prioritize or to devalue. And when I think about the mindset of our health as a personal responsibility, right? That your health is an individual uh, act that can look like a moral decision, or it can also look like, um, you know, uh, something that your individual body was able to do in comparison to other bodies. So then this like idea of competition comes up as well. So I think about the ways in which that mindset um, fragments fragments the body, but also fragments the capacity to imagine. It cuts off the capacity to incorporate, and therefore it cuts off the capacity to um, yeah, it's like the whole holistic would be a threat to that to the utility of that mindset. So that's just like as I'm thinking about it from a power standpoint and from from the standpoint that's like political, but also what when it comes down to it, it really is relational. It is how we view ourselves in relationship to all that is and to each other. So I just wanted to slow that down because I think that's deeply important for us also as we think about like the systems that are set up to block us from our holistic health,
Yeah.
and that we internalize those messages. Um, so please
Yes.
continue, but I needed to break that down.
Yeah, no, I mean it's very true. And so I mean think about anything that's divisive doesn't create a sense of synergy and alchemy and homeostasis. And so it's like we are living in a time where we can't afford this anymore. And we see this divisiveness, and
Yeah.
it's not serving anyone in the bigger picture. There's not enough room for ego anymore because now people's lives are seriously at stake. The WHO and some other medical literature has indicated that globally, the number one primary ailment that people suffer with is depression. today.
Yeah.
And then the studies continue to show that and then the way it breaks down is 1 in every 3 people have at least one type of chronic disease already manifested. And chronic diseases could be obesity, prediabetes, depression, anxiety, any type of IBS kind of thing,
Hmm.
skin issues, like, all these kind of things that are just percolating. And it's like with all the advancement of medicine, Western medicine, science, and we have more diseases now, we have more people now with more diseases than we've ever had. So if the argument is like, well, there's more people, so there's more people getting sick. And there was, yeah, sure. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, we were definitely significantly a lower population of people on the planet, and there were less people still sick. And that's the thing, there were still less ill people. And it's not because of lack of identifying um, people having issues, because all the different systems were existing for a long period of time and could pick up when people are ill. But this more of it because once the Industrial Revolution hit, once we started all these innovations that occurred after like the 1870s, 1890s, all the way through. It's like we have, with all the technological advances to electricity, from the wires going from underground to above ground to, everything and all the, you know, um, it's been expedited with all the chemicals and, from the Freon, from the air conditioning to the refrigerators that we were getting in the 60s and 70s. And to all the preservatives in food and things like that. So we're just like and now we're living a lifestyle that is not sustainable for anyone, and everyone is affected because reality is like in Ayurveda, we're this personal that if one person's sick, then I am sick, whether
Hmm.
it's mental or physical. We are
Hmm.
one unified people, one unified being on this planet, and we're sharing the planet, and the planet's getting sick. And one of the things I was just listening to is in the talk, and I'm remembering the data that came out 6 to 8 months during the beginning of COVID was that as everyone was stuck inside, the air pollution decreased and the water pollution decreased and water started clearing up within like 4 to 6 months. This is the data that's shown globally. And it's like, so we should be worried about the planet because this is our house. If you're living in a house with dysfunctional people in the house, of course you're going to be disrupted. So if you clear the house of the dysfunction, then the house can be brought back to like health and well-being. And then your inner house, your temple of the body that's housing this chetana, which is this consciousness, which is the essence of the ayu of the life that you're living in this body, known as who you are by your name. Like in the bigger picture, this is the macrocosm, microcosm. And in Ayurveda, we have a shloka that's, loka purusha samya, which is like microcosm, macrocosm, as above, so is below. This is where this came from in all the modern spiritual practices and what you hear in like New Age spirituality, like as above, so below. Yes, this is a direct translation from Sanskrit, from Ayurveda that says Loka Purusha Samya, which is like, yes, there's some stories in the Vedas that say like you can dissect the human being to all its parts and identify how it exists in the cosmos. There's this relationship to all the cells and atoms and planets and galaxies and like how the eyes represent this and the sun. Like it's beautiful. Like the poetry is beautiful, but the poetry gives us capacity to think. And so we're thinking, well, we're in this body, and it's like, well, what are the tools? And Ayurveda is that tool that teaches us as that rule book of how to live life, along with life, aligned with life. Um, it's the bigger picture. It's not us separate from life. And it's
Ah,
our relationship to like our day to day and how we're utilizing the senses that will dictate the quality of health, including mind. And so when we think about gut health, there is the physical, physiological component of like the stomach and the pancreas and spleen, et cetera, and all the enzymes that come here and yada, yada, yada. Of course, um, this is physical matter. This is the part of the 5 elements in Ayurveda. And then there is also the understanding, like what are you doing mentally that you're digesting and not digesting because emotional body is affecting mental body and a mental body is the bigger umbrella, but that's also the bigger umbrella affecting the whole physical body. And so if we're corrupted in our senses, then the access to the gut knowledge, the intuitive feeling, that inner physician, that inner capacity of knowing, it's going to be obscured. This is tamas in
mhm.
Ayurveda. And so it's like, how can you trust that? You don't want to discount that if truly some sort of like ray of light peeks through the dark, dense clouds in the sky of a storm, like that ray of light comes through. That's the intuitiveness that's trying. It's very subtle, just like the subtle whispers in consciousness that pierces through the mental, and chaotic thoughts for like a brief second. If you're able to really distinguish it, like, this is truth speaking. This is why in Ayurveda and in yoga we talk about, dharana and dhyana, which is like cultivating the senses, going inward and meditating so that you can make space. This is the thing we have difficulty with, is space. Space from each other. In Ayurveda, it's called Akash, and it's like no space. It's not just outer space, it's inner space. And it's like, physically when I used to start, when I would start consulting people many years ago in Ayurveda, I would always break down what the elements are and how this breaks down in realistic ways in the body so we don't think of it as a mystical abstract concept. I would say like, well, you have space in the joints, right? And you have space
Hmm.
between the organs, even though they're all compacted together, there's still space. When you go to the woods, you can see like even though you have a tree with many branches and many leaves, there's space in between. There's always going to be space in between one thing to the next. And creating space for that, we do it just day to day when we're like, oh, I'm so upset at you. I need to take a break from our conversation. You're taking space, right? It's funny how we
Yes.
take space. I'm so stressed and my anxiety's high. Let me just, I just took space. We're taking these
Yes.
things, and so it's utilizing these tools that are so inherent to all of us. And in Ayurveda, we hold everyone accountable. You're not going to come to Ayurveda, see someone within 15 minutes in and out, and you're good to go. And one thing is in Ayurveda, you develop a relationship with your patients. And you take the time. It could be 15 minutes, and at that point, it could be like the Vaidya or the physician kind of already like has an understanding really quickly, gathers information very quickly, and it's like boom, boom, boom. But the connection's already been established through this thread. The other thread that connects us besides just the questioning and exam, one piece of the exam is called Nadi Parikshana, which is like checking the pulse. And Nadi is the
Hmm.
pulse. So in Western medicine, you're checking heart rate and all these kind of little things. In Ayurveda, you're checking that maybe if it's needed, but you're tapping into the person's heartbeat. You're entering into their
Yes.
field. You're entering you're penetrating them on a very intimate level once you connect with that awareness. And then when you make
Yes.
that connection from your prana to their prana, your chi to their chi, your life force to their life force, like they're coming to you for the reestablishment of their life force. And
Can
in
I
our
just pause you
yes.
there? As one of your patients who can attest to this, um, as as one of your patients who came to Ayurveda for that very reason, I know that I was seeking. It could have been like I came to you, right? If I came to you from like a Western medicine mindset, right? Which I absolutely, that's always going to be with me. I'm living in it, but I have a conscious awareness of it. So I'm going to come to you with all these symptoms, with all of these fragmented pieces. But in my coming to you, what I was really seeking was to be in right relationship with my life, with it. I wanted to be um, the with the aliveness. I wanted to have a felt sense of aliveness. Like this was the core desire, the core need for me. And I think that the speed at which we move in survival, right? In survival, in capitalism, in um, it does not allow us to have a relationship, right, with our lives, with the life force, with the consciousness, with ourselves. And so my desire, right, may not come forth fully in an intake form, but when you do read my pulse and you actually slow us down, right, as I'm sharing oh, this is what's going on, and this is what's going on, and I'm running down this list, and this, oh, this hurts, and blah, blah, blah. And then you put your two fingers on my pulse, and everything slows down.
Three fingers.
Three fingers. I'm sorry, three fingers. You do three fingers. Three fingers in my pulse, and everything slows down. And it is very different, obviously, from when I walk in to get a checkup, and it's like, oh, go stand on the scale, go come over here. I'm going to put this blood pressure cuff on you. Like I'm checking the box. I don't know who you are, or I do know who you are, but we have 10 minutes after this. But underneath all of that procedure, when I come to you, there is a reconnection, reestablishment of my relationship with my life force. I feel that um, that you are creating room for that, and that does allow me to be accountable, right? Because I'm in a relationship with my life force, and I feel that you are in a relationship with my life force, and so there is something that in that uh, in that awareness that comes through in that slowing down to make connection with from your prana to my prana
Mhm.
um, that calls me um, it calls me into that accountability with my life force and
Mhm.
and not from shame, which I think is often something that happens when I go to the doctor. It's like, um, oh, there's an invitation to
Mhm.
come back into relationship with my life force, and with my soul's presence or my soul's um, journey, if you will, through this in this lifetime. Um, yeah, that just like that all happens with those three fingers on my pulse.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's the thing we need, and we need that, the consistency of that, because it's like anytime we get into an opportunity that slows us down, that allows us to create space from the whirlwind, from the
Hmm.
tornado, amidst tornadoes, amidst hurricanes, is always the eye that's still in that most still place.
Yeah.
And so mentally, the mind is always swirling and has to be wrangled with because the senses are just going to be all over the place and it's going to give obscure information, get interpreted inappropriately, and then you're thinking how you're acting from this impulsive place as intuition. Impulsivity isn't always true intuition, right? Impulsivity
Yeah.
sometimes, or more often than not, comes from this rajasic place of chaos and fragmentation of the mind, that it's just kind of all over the place and just trying to pick up all the information and just go with each one. But that's not necessarily proper intuitiveness, you know. And so then chaos begets chaos, and so confusion begets confusion. So how do we make clear, conscious choices from that place? We have to slow down. And that's the hard
Hmm.
thing because everything is speeding up. We're going to see what's going to happen in 2026 because, 2025 is 25 and we've made a lot of advancement, but 2026 is going to feel like 2040 with really the robots that are coming
Hmm.
so extensively now, and the AI,
Yeah.
the way like it's going to be a different world as of next year for sure.
Yes, it
And
is.
we always say like, oh, these technologies are meant to make things easier. Yeah, if you're living and thriving and happy and don't have any physical ailments, physical or mental, then sure, you're living in alignment. But if you're feeling more depressed, more anxious, on more medications, Western medicines, then really are you aligned with your Ayu? Are you really aligned with your Chetana? Are you really aligned with the heartbeat, the pulse of your life in this body? Because your pulse is very fleeting. You'll be gone, within 90, 90 years lifespan. If we're saying, I mean, average lifespan is reduced for sure. But we'll say 90 is a nice number. 90
Thanks.
years is very like nothing, huh?
I want it to be a good 90 though. Like that's
Yeah,
a
you want to be a
yeah,
good
yeah, yeah.
90, and that's the thing, sometimes over the years I've heard people say, well, you're going to die of something anyway. Of course you are. You have to die.
Yeah,
That beautiful
but
seed that was the acorn develops into this gorgeous tree, of course, and then the tree has to go and it gives more acorns. But you're not here as the tree to seed anymore. Just like the seed that creates the sunflower, it goes from a seed to like a sprout to a sunflower that's 12 feet tall, and then you watch it degenerate, and then it becomes nothing and composted again. Of course, this is the state of the universe. This is the truth.
Hmm.
This idea of running and living forever and trying to use current sciences and technologies and medicine to prolong that is not realistic. Nothing's meant to
Hmm.
live forever. So you're going against nature when you're trying to force it. What you want to do, and this is why it's also in the name in Ayurveda, because Ayurveda, it's not just Eastern medicine. It's given birth to the East and only for the people that live in the East or in Asia. It's a universal medicine. And
Hmm.
similarly, we're all people universally from end to end of the planet and beyond.
Yes.
And knowing like what is the life and how precious is it? How is it to be cultivated? And especially with these fast things that are advancing so quickly that people can't even keep up with anymore. And it's like it's more of a way to lose yourself. But you're not meant to live 1,000 years or 2,000 years or immortally. Like what is immortal? We're trying to capture in a physical body that's prone to decay. You know, dosha is
Hmm.
also, dosha also translates to that which decays. Because
That's right.
doshas and vata, pitta, and kapha, all these things are concepts that we've created to understand the bigger pieces, the bigger principles of life, which is the core of Ayurveda, the Siddhanta, the internal teachings of what Ayurveda is, that all these other little concepts of vata, pitta, and kapha, and prana, tejas, and ojas, and all these things come from. They're constructed, from people that have like reflected on and interpreted and kind of, you know, created these ways of identifying as a language. But these things are rooted in something that was observed, that weren't really spoken of, that are essential. And those are the things that are timeless. This is why Ayurveda is a nadi. It's timeless. And when
Hmm.
Ayurveda is practiced properly, which means that it's not New Age Ayurveda, which is a diluted model of Ayurveda, which will fall very quickly, especially with the way things are moving. Ayurveda is completely adaptable. It's been timeless. It's always been, and it will always be. And it will be the thing that people come back to because Ayurveda can understand all of the universe, all of the life, all of how it works, all of how it connects, how we connect with all the things. That's the key. And Ayurveda is a science because it's been studied and it continues to be studied for thousands of years.
Hmm.
And it is essential because, again, it is about accountability. It is about like, what are you doing within the context of your ayu, within your life, within your nadi, within your pulse, within your breath, in this fleeting existence, whether it is prolonged another 80 years after 80 because of conventional medicine. But then you have to think about what are you doing to the soul? Like the soul came here with a
Yes.
certain contract. Some of these things obviously are part of the soul because if you're in this time period where you're like, oh, I have access to robots now. And then we look at this from the karmic standpoint. And like I said, Western medicine doesn't look at karma because it doesn't understand karma, makes it a sign, a spiritual, mystical concept. But it's been around thousands of years for reasons that Western medicine's still too myopic to understand. And Western medicine can never put Eastern medicine, holistic medicine, in a box without cutting off all the pieces. But if you're cutting off the pieces to fit it, then you're not getting the whole picture. You
That's right.
you can't. Ayurveda can fit our allopathy into it because it already understands all of it.
That's right.
Without pieces being cut off. No pieces cut
That's right.
off. A colleague of mine, she was like, oh, she's a naturopath. And so she's like, oh, do you sometimes take labs? I'm like, yeah, we request labs because it's just one more piece of information. I know when it's
Hmm.
needed, I know how to use it. It's not everything is rooted in the labs because I've had many patients come with, you know, labs looking clear and they're obviously still presenting with symptoms. And this is the discordance. It's like, well, the
Hello.
labs
That was,
aren't showing this, but Ayurveda knows how to look for it. Eastern medicine knows how to look for it because there's more things to look at from different angles.
I think that's, and that's obviously that's been my experience over the last, certainly over the last year, where I have had all of the labs, all of the blood work over and over and over. And, uh, you know, when when we work together in response to the labs, You absolutely did. I actually felt that like you were like, oh, okay, yep. Well, this is helpful. We know this, and also, this is what we are seeing, witnessing, and trying to understand with the symptoms that you're presenting, which is a very different experience than when I received the labs and my doctor says, okay, well, nothing to tell you.
Yeah.
Right? Which,
Yep.
can feel really incredibly defeating. And to feel like your experience isn't real because it can't be explained by this system. But I think, again, in our work together, it has also then allowed me to trust myself, to trust my gut, to trust
Hmm.
the inner knowing that what I'm experiencing is real,
Yeah.
and that there are ways in which I can be in a relationship with my life force as well to validate my experience. And then I'm actually then more attuned to to my care. Like the way that I pay attention to poop is just
Yeah.
it's a high order skill that I have now. That and that I think is um just a like a tiny example of what that kind of invitation to relationship with your life force, with your health, has been afforded to me in my Ayurvedic care with you.
Yeah. And from the Western standpoint, having had training in Western medicine, but also training as a uh, researcher many years ago, like it's like you want to look for evidence-based things, right? And
Hmm.
it's like, okay, yeah, and you're taught what you're supposed to look for, using RCTs or like randomly controlled trials to kind of like support evidence-based things. And Ayurveda is obviously evidence-based because one, the simplicity of it that it's been around for over 5,000 years. It's treated billions of people over the millennia. And so this would indicate, there is, because I know Western medicine looks for like placebo effects. And in recent studies in the past like 5 to 10 years, Western medicine has found a way to use placebo as an active component for medicine, right? To help activate.
Hmm.
Yeah, these have been studies. Some of these studies
Hmm.
associated with like meditation and things like that, deep breathing, pranayama, yoga. So the yoga has been influencing some of the Western because they've been studying the yoga. And so it's like if I influence you with a thought or a mental concept, your mind's going to create some sort of understanding around it and kind of integrate into its well-being. And so that's the placebo effect. And so it was first looked down upon as like placebo. Like placebos were looked down upon as like, okay, this is how we know like the thing is working, not working, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's like, oh, now we can use this as a tool to really help activate people through the power of suggestion, which we already
Hmm.
know. This is not new science. But there had to be like, supported in some research article to say like this is the thing. Anyways, which is fine because that's how Western medicine tries to operate. And look at the evidence based in Ayurveda. I mean, there's so many, that's the trick about considering research in Ayurveda, because it's like if you're doing research in Ayurveda, are you trying to meet the research standards of current times to fit into this box that you're cutting pieces of just to kind of appease? Number two is like, do we really need to appease, Western medicine as if they are the hierarchy when like Ayurveda is the oldest? And we have to understand that it's treated billions of people. Even now, like, I'm part of these Ayurveda groups, and I see physicians in India curing oral cancer that Western doctors could not cure, we'll say cure or resolve, in Ayurvedic clinical panchakarma treatments. Like, and I see the images and I see the report and I
Hmm.
read the art. Like, these are things that are being generated. People that have full body kind of like eczema, psoriasis for like decades. And I watch the photos, going from the progression of like the disrupted skin to like clear skin,
Yes.
like all through Ayurveda, in many years. I think this was at the beginning of COVID, if not just before. It was like noted, it was in the news, like the first surgery recognized by Western medicine in India that was done without anesthesia, but only Ayurvedic herbs to supplement the anesthesia. It was the well, and it was like, oh, so it's like this is the evidence based. And then as far as evidence
Yes.
based, the tricky thing is, Western medicine is like, let's group people together and see if we can treat them all the same. And Ayurveda, it's like, let's look at each person to see that even though we're all people and all one, we are slightly different because the doshas or the biological constituents and how they're ratioed off in our physiology is different. So you can't do a one size fits all. So when you think about one size fits all, Ayurveda, true traditional Ayurveda doesn't do one size fits all. Like basic one size fits all will be the dinacharya practices, when you should wake up, when you should sleep, when you should have a bowel movement, when you should have exercise, when you should have sex, when you should, repose, when you should have dinner. Like this is because you're aligned with nature, and the disconnect from nature is what increases the the reduction of lifespan.
Yes.
Staying up when you should be sleeping, and um exercise exercising at lunch when you should be eating if you're hungry. Like these are the basic things that Western medicine is not capturing yet. Ayurveda has caught this, and it's like every disease per process that is established within a person. It's very quick to already understand in Ayurveda. Diet or lifestyle has contributed to this somehow, for sure.
Hmm.
You know, we think of
Hmm.
genetics in Western medicine, and you know, uh, and Ayurveda is like, yeah, this is dosha, this is chetana, this is ayu, this is the prakriti, which is the biological constitution, which is like the essence of the person, like what their genetic material is. Yeah, you can almost, not really completely, but just for lay purposes, equate genetics to prakriti, which is like the biological foundation, and then New Age
Hmm.
Ayurveda is like, oh, you're about to Pitakafa constitution. That's even just not when a person's saying that, that's how you can tell like they're new agey and not traditional Ayurveda. And so if you're like, oh, I have a Vata practice lifestyle that's like
Like, what does that
this is
mean?
not proper. It's more complicated than that. And you try to simplify it, but again, it's like we started the conversation, with a colleague that doesn't want to use the Sanskrit or can't use the Sanskrit because it might be an obstacle to like reaching Ayurveda. It's how you deliver it, because you want to bring it in its totality so people will have it. It
Hmm.
raises awareness also.
Yes.
And this is the thing, challenge your brain to expand and raise awareness, not be dumbed down to. We have enough of
Well,
this.
I think this also, and I know we're wrapping up a time, but I think what's really coming alive for me as like one of the lessons to take from today is about relationship, which it always is, but I just want to really zoom in on, even as you described the desire to simplify or to reduce or to place into categories like, oh, if I can put it in a category like Vata informed, or to be able to simplify and uh, and also I want to say like distance um, from the wisdom, to simplify, and which also I think is a very Western thing to diminish the and devalue the Sanskrit, right? To say, oh, I can take this part but not that. That is the medicine. The relationship with Ayurveda is not I take this and not that. I'm gonna focus on what I can access. And if I can't access this language, then it's not actually right. Like I'm still distanced
Hmm.
from the wisdom and the medicine. Or I can extract what is useful. That's so Western.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah,
colonial.
yeah, yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
it is, right? Like if I think about it from that perspective, I'm like, nah. But also that is, I think, uh, how um, how we can move at that speed. Like we move at that speed, and that speed it feels natural. And so that speed allows us to be out of relationship with our life force, out of relationship with the wisdom. That
Hmm.
is the reason. That is for me. That is why the medicine works, because it calls me into right relationship, into
Hmm.
wholeness. Um, and so that I feel like is mm, that's the invitation. That's the lesson.
And it's the lesson, it's the invitation, but it's also, just the just to affirm this is also evidence-based, right?
Hey.
Because when Ayurvedic treatments are implemented, when Ayurvedic herbal protocols are implemented, when dietary lifestyle in general is implemented, with time, like Ayurveda is a little bit of a slower moving medicine because there are a lot of pieces to navigate at once. It's not a quick pill that you swallow and everything is taken care of. If a person's lifestyle and diet got them into the conditions, then you have to change some of these things to get out of the condition. That takes time. You can't do this in
Yeah.
24 or 48 hours. And the longer you've been doing these bad behaviors, we'll say bad, then it's going to take you a bit of time. So you can't expect it to be like boom done. But with the discipline, the consistency of it, the integrating it over time, the things will change over time. And you replace the old habits with new habits, takes time. And this becomes self-evident in its presentation. This is the evidence based in the person that's living proof, like as, like these things are making me feel better. And now I can see
Hmm.
life more expansively, more brilliantly, you know. And this is the sophistication of Ayurvedic medicine. It's so
Hmm.
sophisticated, you
Hmm.
know. And it's not just
Hmm.
like a quick remedy of like, do this little tea with this little diet thing. It's so much more than that. And it is proving through time, and has proven through time how it's existing because people, so many people benefit from it, you know.
Yeah.
And to not be dissuaded by just, well, it's, like I have a patient um that he started to come to see me for an upper respiratory issue that's been long-standing for a while. And, I suggested some herbal formulations, and his family put a foot down on him saying, don't do this, Ayurveda doesn't work. And when he came in recently, and I discussed this a little bit further, he's like, yeah, give me some time to chip away at my family. And I said, what's the primary argument? He said, well, both my kids are doctors. I said, what's the primary argument? Well, he said, he's like, I believe in it. He's like, I want to do this, but they won't let me. And I'm like, well, that's a whole different story. But he said, my two doctor kids said Bill Gates attempted to use Ayurveda but was unsuccessful. He's like, have you heard this? And I said, I've not heard of Bill Gates. And so I went to research, and the current research, based on what I looked up, said there is no evidence to show that Bill Gates did anything with Ayurveda except to speak with the minister in India at this Ayurvedic yoga retreat, et cetera, and sort of like integrating like these principles. I'm like, and that was my intuition, my
Yeah.
deeper knowing of one of my senses, because in Ayurveda we use all the five senses. Western medicine's not sure, they use partial senses. That's why they use touch for pulse, and they listen to you.
Hmm.
Like you can't exclude the other senses. You use all the senses. And my
Hmm.
sense was like, even if what this was the case, my first, argument to him was he might maybe Bill Gates didn't maybe Bill Gates saw like a lifestyle coach of Ayurveda and not a true Ayurvedic physician. Because Karna Karya, cause and effect. If Bill Gates came in with a condition of sorts, whether it was insomnia, constipation, dry skin, you know, his eyesight was declining, Ayurveda will address this. Cause and effect. You do these particular treatments, take these particular herbs, you take this diet and lifestyle into consideration and integration, you will get cause and effect. So I'm not
Hmm.
sure. I would have to sit with Bill Gates and say, who did you see? What did they do? What was the protocol? What did you go in with? How were you examined? Like you see a doctor, it's like, what did he do? What medicine did he give
But
you? What did he assess?
in that answer, because there was so much that came up, I just have to, bring it back to this point around the evidence and I actually have so much compassion for this patient and also for their family, because I think that the um the data set, right, that they are using to make an assessment is to affirm a judgment, right? It is to affirm because in what research methods would you be able to use one subjective data set and say that that is a conclusion that you can draw to make decisions from? Like it's like a they said example. Where'd you get this data? Well, they said
Yeah. Mm.
like, right, like the so I think that but and also right, like we can joke, and also I want to again affirm how how there is something else that is happening there in the protection of um a one way of making sense, or one way of thinking and creating knowledge and conclusions, a one way
Yeah.
of doing that that would allow for scientists, right? So for scientists to use a data set that was subjective from the internet or wherever to qualify, to confirm um, the judgment.
Yeah.
And also that like people are doing that all the time. This is
Yeah.
also where I feel like, AI is a little dangerous as a research tool, but I think that we're bringing your this piece, I think, because you're also treating people's families. I mean, you know this. My child is always like, "What's that oil coming out of your nose? What do you smell like?" I have to move all of my herbs. What's in this cabinet? Oh,
Yeah.
both of them are highly sensitive
Yeah.
smellers, if you will,
Yeah.
my family.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's well, what are you doing? Where are you going? And what are you putting
Yeah.
on? And, and I'm
Well,
like, I'm
and so for
committed.
this patient to help him support his argument, because I know Ayurveda works. One, I've lived it. So even if I close shop
I
and
know
have
it works,
another
period.
patient, I will always defer to Ayurveda first before anything else. So I know. Two, I've seen so many people's lives change when they're like committed to the process and really engaged in it. So, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this almost 25 years if I didn't see something as a scientist. Um, Three, just like I said, to support his argument, I researched like the Bill Gates information, gave him like the data saying there's no evidence. Here's the reputable source, I said. Then
Hmm.
I said, just for fun, I said, let me look up famous people that have used Ayurveda for healthcare, and I pulled up a list of 15, 20 names, gave him the link, and then I
Hmm.
said, and let's go to more authorities from the Western standpoint, what they need to see. The National Institute of Health, which is a reputable source in like documentation, research, analyses, that's been around for a long time, and WHO, led by physicians and scientists. Both of these major sources, NIH and WHO, have given attributes to Ayurveda, have given a space for Ayurveda, have
Hmm.
given understanding to Ayurveda. And so if you still want to be the doctor that's myopic, then you're the one that's going to cause the most harm in your patients.
Yeah, that's right.
So, anyways,
Um,
we can conclude on that because it's time for me
Pass the time.
to.
I thank you for bringing this wisdom forth today, Dr. A. Um, for folks, you can find Dr. A at stillpointayurveda.com. Is there anything else you want to share today as we close out?
No, I'm always looking forward to working with new people and exploring them through their adventures of their individual life representation expressions, and support with the intention of Ayurveda as the foundation, the optimization of a person's life, and really getting them to a place, you know, of really living life fully with as less of a physical obstruction and mental affliction as possible.
That's
And
right.
this is my life's work. This is my dharma and supports my soul's purpose, and it makes me very happy. I get very passionate and very excited. So sometimes when I'm speaking very quickly, I'm just very excited to share this, because this wisdom of Ayurveda, the science of Ayurveda, this sophistication and intricacy, the complexity, the amazingness of Ayurveda is something I just want to keep paying it forward, and it pays itself forward. It's been doing it timelessly, and it will continue even past my little fragment of breath in this body in this life. So
Ashe.
anyone can come from any part of the world, because this is how amazing Ayurveda is. And I look forward to seeing who you are and meeting you where you're at.
Wow. I thank you. I can attest to all of that as someone who has experienced the blessing of you living your Dharma and you walking this purposeful soul path and helping to call folks. And I can speak for me absolutely as my prayer is to live in my life, to be in relationship with my life. And that's a life commitment. So we will see you next month. And in the meantime, take good care.
Take good care. Namaste, everybody.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.